In January of 1978, the United States faced one of the most destructive winter storms in its history. It was not simply a snowstorm. It was not simply extremely cold. It was a prolonged, violent, and relentless assault by nature, one that shut down cities, stranded millions, and claimed over 100 lives. 4 days, much of the Midwest and Northeast was paralyzed. Roads vanished. Cars froze in place. Entire neighborhoods were swallowed by snowdrifts taller than houses. This was the Great Blizzard of 1978. The winter that buried America. The winter of 1977 to 1978 was already unusually severe. Beginning in December, Arctic air repeatedly plunged southward from Canada, gripping the central and eastern United States. Temperatures stayed well below normal for weeks at a time. The Great Lakes began freezing earlier than expected, reducing lake effect moderation and intensifying the cold. Snowstorms had already struck multiple regions. Fuel shortages were a growing concern. People were exhausted before January had even reached its end. But none of that compared to what was about to unfold. Meteorologically, the blizzard of 1978 was the result of a rare and dangerous alignment of weather systems. In late January, a powerful high-pressure system settled over eastern Canada, forcing bitter Arctic air southward. At the same time, a developing low-pressure system moved east from the southern plains, drawing warm, moisture-rich air northward from the Gulf of Mexico. When these two systems collided over the Ohio Valley and Great Lakes, the storm rapidly intensified. Instead of moving quickly eastward, as most winter storms do, the system stalled. This stalling allowed the storms to continuously draw energy, moisture, and cold air, creating blizzard conditions that persisted for days. Snow began falling across Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, and Illinois on January 25. At first, the snowfall appeared ordinary. But within hours, conditions deteriorated dramatically. Snowfall rates increased to 3 and 4 inches per hour. Winds strengthened to hurricane-force gusts, exceeding 70 miles per hour in some areas. Temperatures dropped below zero, with wind chills reaching 40 degrees below zero. Visibility dropped to nearly nothing. Whiteout conditions made it impossible to tell where roads ended and fields began. The blizzard had arrived. The Midwest was among the first regions to be devastated. In Ohio, especially in Cleveland and surrounding areas, snowfall totals exceeded 30 inches. Snowdrifts reached heights of 15 to 20 feet. Interstate highways became impassable within hours. Thousands of vehicles were stranded. Some were abandoned mid-lane as drivers fled on foot. Others were simply buried where they stalled. In Michigan, rural communities were completely cut off. Emergency responders were unable to reach stranded families. Snowplows themselves became stuck or disabled. In Indiana and Illinois, winds whipped loose snow into massive drifts, making clearing efforts nearly impossible. The presence of the Great Lakes added fuel to the storm. As cold air passed over partially frozen water, it picked up additional moisture, intensifying snowfall in downwind regions. Lake effect snow bands added to already staggering totals. In some areas, snow fell continuously for over 48 hours. The storm's persistence made it one of the most punishing winter events ever recorded in the region. One of the most haunting images of the blizzard of 1978 was the sheer number of abandoned vehicles. Entire stretches of interstate highways were transformed into frozen parking lots. Many drivers underestimated the storm, attempting to commute or travel despite warnings. As conditions worsened, vehicles stalled, fuel ran low, and engines froze. Some motorists survived by sheltering in their cars for days. Others attempted to walk to safety, often losing their bearings in the blinding snow. Tragically, not all survived. As the blizzard continued, it expanded eastward into Pennsylvania, New York, and New England. The storm reached the Northeast on January 26 with devastating force. Snowfall intensified, and winds strengthened as the system interacted with Atlantic moisture. Coastal flooding became an additional threat as powerful winds pushed seawater inland. Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut were among the hardest hit states. Boston experienced sustained winds over 50 miles per hour, with gusts nearing 80 miles per hour. Snowfall exceeded 2 feet in many locations. Cars were frozen in place along city streets. Snowdrifts swallowed entire vehicles. Public transportation shut down completely. For the first time in state history, Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis declared a total driving ban. Only emergency vehicles were allowed on the roads. It was an unprecedented decision, and a necessary one. For millions of Americans, daily life ground to a halt. Businesses closed indefinitely. Schools were shut for weeks in some districts. Grocery stores ran low on supplies. In some neighborhoods, residents tunneled through snowdrifts to reach neighbors. Second-story windows became primary exits. People rationed food, fuel, and heat. In the absence of mobility, communities turned inward, relying on one another for survival. The blizzard of 1978 claimed over 100 lives across the United States. Deaths occurred from exposure, heart attacks brought on by strenuous shoveling, carbon monoxide poisoning from improper heating, and traffic accidents during the storm's early hours. Emergency services were overwhelmed. Ambulances could not reach many calls. Hospitals struggled to maintain staffing as workers themselves were stranded. Each fatality told a story of how unforgiving the storm truly was. As conditions worsened, state governments mobilized the National Guard. Military vehicles were deployed to deliver food, fuel, and medical supplies. Snowmobiles and tracked vehicles became essential tools for rescue operations. In rural areas, National Guard units went door-to-door checking on isolated residents. It was one of the largest domestic emergency mobilizations since World War II. One of the defining characteristics of the blizzard of 1978 was its duration. Unlike typical winter storms that pass within a day, this blizzard lingered. Repeated waves of snow and wind battered already buried regions. Cleanup efforts were undone repeatedly as new drifts formed. Some areas remained snowbound for over a week. The psychological toll was immense. When the skies finally cleared, the scale of destruction became apparent. Roofs collapsed under the weight of snow. Vehicles were damaged or destroyed. Infrastructure repairs took months. Economic losses reached into the hundreds of millions of dollars. But perhaps the greatest impact was on how Americans viewed winter weather. The blizzard of 1978 exposed serious weaknesses in forecasting, communication, and emergency response. In its aftermath, weather prediction models were improved. Snow emergency plans were revised. Driving bans became standard policy. Public awareness of winter storm dangers increased. The storm reshaped how the nation prepared for extreme weather. More than 4 decades later, the blizzard of 1978 remains the benchmark against which all winter storms are measured. It is remembered not just for its snowfall totals, but for its power, persistence, and human impact. For those who lived through it, the memory remains vivid. The blizzard of 1978 was more than a weather event. It was a reminder that despite modern technology, nature can still bring civilization to a standstill. It buried America in snow, tested endurance and compassion, and it forever changed how the nation prepares for winter. The blizzard of 1978 will never be forgotten. Thank you for joining us in Today U.S. History. Do well to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel.